All right. So the staff recommendation is to hold this issue open until the May revise, and so I'd like to hold off on questions and move to issue 4, cost of a living adjustment.
Okay, the governor's budget proposes $48.5 million to provide a statutory 0.86% cost of living adjustment. This is consistent with what was provided to K-12.
Elio.
Well, just to clarify that a cost of living adjustment is not statutorily required for community colleges, but historically community colleges have received the same COLA adjustment that K-12 has. As noted in the agenda, community colleges did not receive a COLA during those lean budget years. You already heard the community colleges may not need all that enrollment growth as proposed, and maybe not all the online tech initiative money as well. So certainly one of the options for the legislature would be to use any freed up money for a COLA, but it's certainly going to be part of the big discussion probably will begin at May revise and into June.
Yeah, certainly colleges have a number of fixed costs that increase year over year regardless of how much the state is funding. Information technology, insurance costs, health costs, step and column issues with the bargaining units, for example. And for 4 years when the colleges didn't receive no COLA at all, they had to essentially eat some of those costs, and effectively that eats into reserves, that results in reduced course sections or support for students because unfortunately the money has to come from somewhere. So we note that K-12 did not receive a COLA over those same 4 years that the community colleges didn't either. And as I understand the LCFF, there's a plan over time to essentially repay that amount, their deficit factor, I think they called it, over the life of the LCFF. It's kind of baked into the cake that the dollar amount will be restored. So I think it's appropriate on our end to think of a similar plan over time to restore the purchasing power to the districts, because that does, again, result in a diminished quality of product that students are offered.
Thank you. Moving on to issue 5, physical plant and instructional support.
So the current year budget provided an augmentation of $30 million for the physical plant and instructional support program. This program funds deferred maintenance projects and instructional equipment for the colleges. According to the Chancellor's Office, there's a roughly $1 billion need for deferred maintenance over the next 5 years. Additionally, the colleges have high needs for instructional equipment, particularly in areas such as CTE and STEM fields and courses. And those are high-cost equipment. Given the colleges have not been able to fully address their deferred maintenance and instructional equipment needs during the recession, we felt it was a prudent use of resources to provide a one-time augmentation of $175 million.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, the governor's budget proposes $175 million for this categorical program, which actually is made up of 2 separate kind of subcategoricals, one for deferred maintenance and the other for instructional equipment and replacement of instructional equipment and library materials is what it's for. So I'll first speak to the maintenance proposal. And the governor proposes to give $87.5 million for maintenance and $87.5 million to replacement of instructional equipment and library materials. So the community colleges really do a good job of tracking and reporting deferred maintenance costs. You just heard the backlog is about $1 billion. We don't have any issue with the governor's proposal for the $87.5 million for maintenance. In fact, to the extent the May revise shows an increase in the proposition minimum guarantee, we recommend the legislature consider providing additional money to additional one-time money for deferred maintenance. While the governor's maintenance proposal has merit, we think the companion proposal to provide $87.5 million for replacement of instructional equipment and library materials needs some more justification. According to the administration, the amount, the $87.5 million, was determined based on the historic practice of providing the same amount for instructional equipment and library materials as is provided for deferred maintenance. Unlike with deferred maintenance, though, the system does not have a list or database of equipment needs or wants. We don't even have the amount the system spends annually on equipment and library materials. And this lack of data makes assessing the reasonableness and the merit of the governor's proposal difficult. You know, $87.5 million, is that excessive, or is that just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's needed? Legislature just doesn't have a sense of that. So we recommend the legislature just get some more information from the administration, providing justification for that $87.5 million. And if the legislature is satisfied, to fund it, and if not, the legislature could use that money for other priorities, including deferred maintenance.
Any quick response to that? No? Okay. All right. Move. Oh, yes.
I was just going to note that we are very supportive of the proposal, as Mr. Steenhausen, or Mr. Rodriguez, I think, noted that we do an annual update of a 5-year capital outlay program, and we routinely find over $200 million in deferred maintenance needs on the part of our district. So this is certainly a very worthy item for funding, particularly when you understand that nearly half of the 5,500 sites in our system are 40 years old or older. So there's a lot of need to fix some leaky roofs out there. One request I would make that the committee consider is that there's currently a 1-to-1 match requirement, state to local dollars in the program. We think it would provide a lot of relief for districts if we were to eliminate or somehow reduce that matching requirement, particularly in a year where districts are receiving a COLA of less than 1%. They're not giving a lot of discretionary resources to meet that match. So if the committee can consider that prior to approving a final budget, we'd be very appreciative.
And moving on to statewide performance measurement and local assistance.
Got it. Currently, the Chancellor's Office is staffed for and acts mainly as an administrative office for the colleges. The Student Success Task Force, as well as other research and policy organizations, have called for a better resource Chancellor's Office that could set goals, provide oversight, and help colleges that are not making progress towards those goals. In line with this recommendation, the governor's budget has proposed providing the Chancellor's Office with $1.1 million to fund 9 positions at the Chancellor's Office and $2.5 million to provide technical assistance to the colleges. These 9 positions will be used in the budget year to work with relevant stakeholders to determine what role the Chancellor's Office should play in all areas of college operations. In addition, the Chancellor's Office will work with these stakeholders to develop short-term indicators of success that will be used to monitor performance of the colleges, and they will develop best practices that they will then disseminate across the colleges that are not meeting their goals. Finally, these positions will be used to develop goals for the system and for the colleges.
So first off, we think the governor's focus on community college performance and statewide leadership is commendable. We're concerned the governor's request for new resources duplicates funding that the system already receives for these activities, however. For example, the governor proposes a new position at the Chancellor's Office to help with technical assistance and statewide level activities in the area of economic and workforce development. A cost of about $100,000 in non-Proposition 98 general fund dollars. Yet the budget already allows community colleges to use up to, in the Chancellor's Office, to use up to $2.3 million in the economic workforce categorical program for various state-level leadership, coordination, and technical assistance purposes. So it's unclear to us at this point why the system needs an additional position to perform what appears to be similar to the same function. And we have other examples as well, which I'd be glad to talk about. We recommend the legislature request more detail on these positions, in particular how the community colleges are using general fund dollars already earmarked for statewide purposes, why the current funding streams are inadequate, and how the proposed positions would further and not duplicate existing efforts. And getting back to an earlier concern we had on the online initiative, a similar issue here. The governor's proposing full-year funding for these 9 positions and this $2.5 million in local assistance funds to start July 1st. Given it's a new program, it's going to take a while to ramp up. So to the extent the legislature agrees with this proposal, probably don't need to put all that money, full-year funding, into this new program, at least for that initial year.
Yeah, on behalf of the Chancellor's Office, we're certainly very supportive of this proposal. As your agenda notes, we have about 84 fewer positions than we had at the beginning of this century. For an entity that's meant to oversee, engage in monitoring, policy development, set performance goals for 112 colleges, 72 districts, serving over 2 million students, I think it's fair to say that we are an inadequately resourced office to, I think, fulfill the role envisioned for us. If you believe that an appropriate role for our office is to set performance goals, monitor performance, provide technical assistance to districts, and do so in a very data-driven way, then I think we need to be adequately resourced to do that, and we think this proposal is a very good first step toward doing that. In addition to the positions, the $2.5 million in local assistance provided, we think, will be extremely helpful for districts to problem solve areas of need in their districts. For example, if you have a district that is concerned about the performance of their basic skills program, this provides them a little pot of dollars on a flexible basis, whereby they can go out and bring in programs from other institutions that have developed successful programs to take a look at what they've done and make recommendations to improve their outcomes over time. It's one thing to monitor performance, but I think we also have to the other arm. We need to be able to provide technical assistance so districts can actually improve what they're doing. And this proposal, I think, works hand in hand that way.
Thank you. And last but not least, the issue of deferrals.
Inter-year deferrals for the colleges reached a high of $961 million in 2011-12. In subsequent budgets, these deferrals have been reduced by $592 million. The governor's budget proposes to eliminate deferrals by paying off the remaining balance. Given that Prop 30 revenues are starting to phase out in 2016-17, and given that we have other obligations to pay for in the future, including a backlog of mandate claims and adult education investments, we believe it's a prudent use of resources to eliminate deferrals in the budget year.
Hello.
So this committee heard this issue back in February when you discussed the overview of the governor's overall Proposition 98 proposals. We think the governor's proposal on deferrals is reasonable. In addition to what finance indicated, paying off deferrals and other education obligations when those Proposition 30 temporary taxes start to trigger off. Another benefit is that using money for deferrals rather than programmatic increases gives the state a buffer, just in case, heaven forbid, there's another downturn in the economy and the state faces the reality of having to make cuts. It's much easier to just rescind the deferrals, continue to pay colleges late, as opposed to tell them, sorry, you're going to have to lay off staff you just hired.
Yeah, I think, as Mr. Steenhausen put it, I think that's where we are in the proposal at this point. Again, we've talked a lot about in this hearing about all the many needs that colleges face over time, and I think we want to make sure that, to the extent that we're funding increases in programmatic support for colleges, that it's sustainable over time, and buying down the deferrals is a way of kind of providing a buffer going forward, so that we don't overextend ourselves too quickly. Given the January level of Prop 98, I think we don't have an issue with paying down the deferrals at this time. Of course, if we get to May revision and there's less resources, I think at that point we may revisit our decision and want to move some more of that money into program. But at this point, we're okay with it.
All right, questions from the committee, starting with Mr. Bobney.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can we go back to issue number 4, cost of living adjustments? When we talk about the COLA issue, I think it's easy to get lost in the fact that these community colleges and the world-class education system that we've developed at the UC, the Cal State, and the community college system throughout the state is really driven by outstanding faculty. And I'm afraid that by not having a COLA adjustment that is in line with the fact that we haven't had one, I think, for the last 5 budget years, I feel like we're losing a competitive advantage to be able to hire, outstanding faculty, and go back to my earlier point, not being able to have enough full-time faculty that have office hours, that have set schedules. I know when I was a student at a community college, I have a relationship with several of my professors from that community college to this day because I had them in 3 or 4 classes, and it really kind of developed my ability to go into public service from those original classes. I'm worried that if we have too many part-time faculty and not enough full-time faculty because we're not competitive enough and we're not increasing the COLA enough to really, give that spending power, that we're going to lose that ability to have really dynamic faculty at these community colleges. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee?
Go.
Next.
Chuck was first.
Really appreciate the way you went through that. I think that was much more beneficial. And I agree. When I get to my point, I'll be supportive of all these items. The only issue I had a question on was the additional positions within the community college. I may have some questions on that because I've often wondered why higher organizations want to do the same job as the organizations that are actually doing the job. The community college districts are responsible for the quality of education, and they have their own metrics and reports and things. So why do I want to have a state organization do the same thing they're doing? I mean, it's how many times you got to polish the rock? I mean, so I probably wouldn't be supportive of that. But make those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ting.
A couple questions and comments, I guess, just overall to the, I guess, both the online initiative as well as the performance measure initiative. I was just concerned why those additional staffing couldn't come from current existing community college staff, whether they just didn't have the competency or the skill, or they just needed more money. In terms of cost of living adjustment, I definitely agree that we definitely need to do something, as well as with the deferred maintenance. It's clear that that issue has been going on for way too many years. Let's see, I had other questions in here. I apologize, and just kind of going through my notes. But I guess in particular, if you could just address why we need additional staffing versus why pre-existing current staff couldn't be working on those issues right now.
Yeah, we at a little over 150 positions in the Chancellor's office right now. That's about roughly 1 1/3 positions for every college we have. I think if you compare our level of staffing to the Department of Education or UCOP, I think you'd find that we're decidedly under-resourced relative to those organizations to carry out the duties that a statewide entity should be doing. We should be able to provide technical assistance to districts that need help. We should be able to set clear statewide performance metrics that reflect state priorities for the over $6 billion in funding we allocate to local districts. We need support to measure those outcomes and see where districts are falling short of those statewide priorities and goals. So I think that these new positions can help us, I think, really adequately resource us to do the role that we should already be providing, but due to budget cuts over the last decade, really, not just the last few years, have impaired our ability to do that. For example, we're no longer able to do compliance review site visits to see if districts are in compliance with all the categorical funding they receive. I have 2 staffers under my watch who look at the audits, the annual independent audits that districts undergo. That's 112 colleges, 2 staffers to look at that audits. I would not suggest that that's inadequate. We're not adequately resourced to provide the oversight we need to.
And just appreciate that. Totally supportive of the online initiative as well as performance measures. So if you could just provide some background, that would be helpful. I also, while I had you here, wanted to try to get an update on San Francisco City College, and just to get a better understanding of where you see the situation is now. We know that funding is one of the critical issues facing the college, and also with the accreditation issues looming. Wanted to just kind of get an update on that.
Yes, thank you. So I think, as most of you know, the Accrediting Commission has found that the City College of San Francisco is fallen short of its accreditation standard, and they have find that they should close as of July this year. In terms of the current process, the district is in what we call the appeal phase. So it is our hope that the district will be able to show the Accrediting Commission that they have made enough substantial compliance. I don't think that they're going to dot the I and cross the T on all of the issues, but it's the view of our office that they've made enough substantial compliance that we think the Accrediting Commission should find a way to recognize the need, recognize not only that progress they've made, but recognize the importance of maintaining affordable higher education to such a large and important area of our state. The commission meets in June, and they make decisions in January and June, traditionally of every year. So that's when I think we'll receive a final determination from them. And again, it's the view of our office is that the commission should find a way to provide some more time for the college to continue working on those needs identified in the commission's reports. We think the college has made substantial progress in a very short amount of time under the leadership of both our special trustee Agrella and the new CEO Art Tyler. They've have almost an entirely new leadership staff on board that is doing exceptional work, burning the midnight oil, trying to get the job done for the residents of the city. They've managed to substantially revise their fiscal monitoring and governance issues. We think that they've made enough progress that we're hopeful that the commission will allow them more time to continue work on that and to serve the community. In the meantime, I think as you alluded to earlier, all the bad news surrounding the college appears to have resulted in a very sharp recent downturn in their enrollment, and we are concerned that may threaten their financial viability, even assuming the accreditation viability is solved. So with that in mind, we are supporting additional stabilization funding for the district with a phased out approach over the next 4 years, and there's legislation in place by Senator Leno that would address that issue.
And what plans, if any, have come in place to help stabilize that slide in enrollment? Because obviously that has sort of long-term ramifications.
What plans do they have?
To stabilize enrollment. To stabilize enrollment.
And just to be clear, I think you have a different question here, but we're recommending stabilizing the funding so they can
understood that.
Not have to make excessive cuts. But in terms of getting the students back in to the system, right. I know our office has worked with them on a media outreach campaign to get the word out to everyone so that they understand that the college is still open for business. They're still providing accredited instruction. And when you read a bad headline in the newspaper or hear a negative radio segment on it, there can be a lot of misunderstanding in the community that they're already closed or that that your credits there won't transfer, and that's not true. We're trying to make sure that everyone still understands that, but it is a challenge, an uphill fight, given all the bad news surrounding the college.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had a few follow-up questions. First, I had a general question for the Department of Finance. We talked a lot about the different categorical programs that the governor is proposing to continue to fund for the community colleges, but why is it that the governor is supportive of, in general, of categorical funding for community colleges at the same time that he abolished the categoricals for the K through 12 system? I mean, what is it about community colleges that is different from K through 12 in terms of the categorical funding?
I think just generally speaking, it's the whole different way that funding is provided for. There is no Proposition 98 for UC and CSU. So the community colleges are given an exact amount of money, the 11% of the total Proposition 98 funds, and then, we decide how is that going to be broken up. Whereas for UC and CSU...
Actually, my question was K through 12 versus community colleges.
Yeah. So I think the difference is kind of what Mr. Troy alluded to a little bit earlier, is the fact that in K-12, there was a lot more money invested into categoricals, whereas in the community colleges, it was a much smaller percentage, like 7 or 8%. I think that's what we calculated last. And so I think when we were looking at how do we provide flexibility to serve these students, we didn't necessarily think it was going to take a complete restructuring of the system because we didn't feel like it was that far off track. So instead of kind of redoing everything maybe similar to what the LEO is proposing, we thought, well, what's the most important thing? Getting flexibility locally. And so we felt like we could do that with the new resources that we had. So I think it just becomes an issue of where the segments were at the time. One had 30, 40% of their funds in categoricals. The other had only less than 10%.
Mm-hmm. All right. Along the lines of categorical funding, one of your programs, the categorical programs are the apprenticeship programs. And I was visited by a representative of the building trades, and they are calling for additional funding for the apprenticeship programs, given that our economy is improving, there's more construction jobs out there, and there's a need to ramp up the apprenticeship programs. Does the Department of Finance have a response to that call for additional funding for apprenticeship programs?
We've heard from a lot of people. We haven't heard from the apprenticeship people yet.
Okay.
So we'll evaluate that.
Sounds like an open invitation.
Always.
From the Chancellor's Office, any thoughts regarding the apprenticeship programs?
I'm afraid I think I may be in the same boat as Mr. Rodriguez. I could certainly coordinate with our staff on that issue and provide some feedback too.
All right, thank you. And last but not least, I would like to also add my voice in support of the cost of living adjustments. I mean, 0.86 proposed adjustment. I mean, that's. I know the governor has a reputation for being fiscally prudent, but as was pointed out earlier, for the last 5 years, the community colleges have not received a cost of living adjustment, and so I think there needs to be consideration for some due cost of living adjustment. Any other questions from the committee? Mr. Chavez.
Just an observation that looking at your budget, it's interesting that about $421 million is one-time funding, so it's just out there one time, and about $407 million is keeps on giving every year. So one-time funding and looking at Prop 30 is probably more realistic. So when you look at cost of living, you're looking at a love that comes every year. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much to the panelists. We would like to now open it up for public comments. Public comments, if you can line up at the microphone. And, okay. Given the large number of people lining up, I would like to request that you try to limit your comments to 2 minutes. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Will Bruce. I'm the EOPS Association president. I also was a former EOPS student and members of the board. Thank you for letting me speak. Rocky, although I didn't like one of your comments, I do like you as a person now that I know you are a former wrestler. I too was a former wrestler, so I can totally relate to some of your positions. And now I know why you're so good at politics here. Push and pull, weight and balance, you really have to be on the ball, and so I commend you for that. But you asked the question, what happened in 1969? EOPS was created in 1969 to make education possible for students of color, low socioeconomic disadvantaged background. Those students will still exist today, even more so now than ever. The gap is so wide now that it's still not equal. So I just implore you that when we start talking about restoring categorical programs and then the whole block grant funding, and Chairman Medasucci, you said that you don't support block grant funding, and this board or this committee never supported block grant funding. And I want to tell you that flexibility is another way of block grant funding. It's basically putting one program against another for the same amount of money. And believe me, if you think politics are hard in the Capitol, politics on some of the campuses are even worse. I mean, evil exists in some of these campuses, believe it or not. I mean, if everybody did the right thing, we wouldn't be here, and we'd be, yes, we could all use the same money, and it'd be great. But it's not like that. On my campus, it's fine, but who knows, 10 years down the road, we might have a different president, and then I might have to, worry about that. We need to restore successful categorical programs like EOPS, full restoration for these programs who are forefront in student equity. We in EOPS has been pushing student equity since 1969. It's about time that now we all are honoring student equity. But don't let this talk of student equity be overshadowed by a disguised push of taking equity away from students. all these students have been overlooked in the past. You know, they've been pushed to the side and marginalized all these years. We are proven, we are successful. EOPS was created for student equity. Fully restore these programs who have been successful with student equity and success. Let us continue our work collaboratively. Since the student initiative, we've been working with the Student Success Initiative. We have been collaborating with all the different programs like DSPNS and CalWorks. And someone said earlier that these programs are all doing the same thing. We're not. We're completely separate. Thank you for not supporting block grant funding, and please don't let this language about flexibility in this proposal fool you, because it would put one program against another. Don't let one student fight for the same money. I'm going to save my time for the other students behind me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Before I forget, I want to leave you all these letters that our students actually signed for Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you. My name is Fabio Gonzalez, and I'm the Vice President of the California Community College Extended Opportunity Programs and Services Association. And I'm not going to repeat what my colleagues mentioned, but I will be supporting a lot, and we agree with a lot of the comments that he made. But as I was listening, everyone who was giving you testimonies about what's going on at the local level, and there's one piece that is being missed, and I really think you need to be fully aware of the transitional leadership that takes place at the local districts. At my college, for example, I have seen 7 different presidents come through in the past 6 years. So while you have all these different initiatives that are trying to move forward, every time a new leader comes with new ideas, comes with new approach, comes with new learning communities, all of those practices work. EOP&S has developed every single one since 1969. So we've been working with our students closely. We understand our students closely. I was actually part of the committee when they started talking about student success with Jack Scott and the whole working group that started working that student success. And they talked about the fact that matriculation was not working at that time. And they needed to fix it because they were spending millions and millions of dollars on matriculation. So we need to develop something different that can work. We came up with student success. And at the same time, we're showing the student numbers with EOP&S and how it's working. In 2012, we actually partnered with an outside agency, the RP Group, to develop a study that shows that EOP&S is successful. We're graduating students. We're transferring students. We're getting our students to go through an apprenticeship program. I'm so glad that you talked to my colleague in San Jose about apprenticeship program and the trades, because that's how our students come into our college. They first want to learn the English. A lot of these individuals are in the working field. They want to get into transfer level courses. They want to get a degree. And who helps them? EOP&S. We connect with them. We know the students really well. They look just like us. And the demographics in California, they changed. The biggest one since 1969, according to researchers, is the biggest change in demographic that actually represents 100% of our EOP&S students. So thank you for letting me address you.
Thank you.